Welcome to the first online lunch of the 15-16 school year. I'm April Domine, the superintendent here in New Albany Public Schools, and it's my pleasure to welcome today our CFO and treasurer, Ms. Becky Jenkins, and our board president, Mr. Mark Ryan. We want to use this as an opportunity to follow up on our state of the schools and our quality profile. We also want to answer all of your questions today. That's really going to be the focus from our follow-up for the state of the schools. We didn't have a lot of time for Q&A that night. But first, before we begin, I want to give you an update on the safety message that I sent to you this morning. I do want to reaffirm to you again that students are safe. Actually, this occurrence is a great example of what happens when our students take responsibility and follow the rule and the slogan that we talk with them about all the time, which is if you see something, say something. So first, I want to start with many thanks to the students and even parents called in and emailed in to the Safe School Hotline, or even emailed or called directly to myself or to the New Albany Police Department or to our principal, Mr. Dwight Carter. Based on your quick action, we last evening were able to intercept a social media message that was threatening and take immediate action. So all of those things have been taken care of. The student is in custody and discipline proceedings will begin. So everyone is safe. The system worked the way it is supposed to work, thanks to many of you that spoke up. So it's a great example of us coming together as a community and everyone taking care of one another. So thank you for those courageous actions. It actually reminded me last night as we were going through that it's not unlike the actions that we hope our students take related to mental health. And we have this week had an extraordinary opportunity, thanks to our partners at the New Albany Community Foundation, to focus on mental health again, and with all of our partners in the Central Ohio region. And so over these last 2 days, there were a student lecture in which we had students not just from our high school, but many area high schools. Last night, a community lecture, also a mental health professionals consortium and panel discussion at the Phil Height Healthy New Albany Center yesterday, and then a small group student discussion yesterday as well on the focus of mental health, mental wellness, around what is Mental Illness Awareness Week this week. And we have done extraordinary amounts of work thanks to our community partners. And so it's an opportunity for me to give a shout out, particularly to community member Rick Baer, who brought the Adam H. grant to us, who helped us connect to Concord Counseling. And thanks to that Adam H. grant, we now have 2 full-time mental health therapists on campus every single day, working with students K through 12, which was critically needed and is now funded through a grant source and not funded through the district, which brings us to the conversation about balancing high quality programs with finances, which is always our focus every single day. I do want to, as we think about recapping state of the schools, and both of you spoke, and I don't know if you haven't had a chance to watch any of those individual videos online, they're posted now. Our focus for our state of the schools and our quality profile, which was discussed with the board Monday night and is going to be released tomorrow morning, is excellent student results. That's what we're here for. And that it takes exceptional teaching and staff to accomplish those results, and that we must do that in a fiscally responsible way. And the 2 of you presented our fiscally responsible piece. We had an introduction from our PTO presidents at the beginning of the session, and so this is a great opportunity for me to just say many, many thanks to PTO again. Our PTOs do incredible work for us, just supporting grants. Effort equals over $50,000 typically annually. So it's an incredible partnership, and thank you to our PTO presidents, and they did a nice job kicking off that state of the schools event. So I know that that was an experience for both of you. I mean, any highlights for you from
The
that
students,
evening?
like the best presenters went first, I would say, because we were last, and so when I was even last after you. So
Yeah.
the students really nailed it. I thought they're so good at presenting in that type of format, which is not common and comfortable for me necessarily, but with the TEDx type format and the way they did their slides and they knew their talk and really they know the school, right? They know better, and they're the perfect people to talk about all that's going on. And that was reinforced the other night at the board meeting. We got to the quality profile. And it's 14 pages long or something. It just tells you about the depth of the quality of the work that's being done. So it was great to have that focus begin with those students and what they're accomplishing, what they're excited about. And then, it's always good then to hear from staff too. So, when we had the high school, Dwight Carter present, and it was the whole K-12 staff and K-TOMA, talk about their work. It's always exciting to just see them in their element and teaching and talking about their work and talking about what they enjoy. So then we had the choice of the dry financial topic and history of how that's done. But I think that's the appropriate balance of you have to fund schools and you have to have expectations about what you want out of them. And so it's important to see that work where the community's making an investment and you're getting a return by the kids' work, and you're seeing who's exciting those kids and who's teaching them and who's bringing them and making them the great citizens that we want them to be in our future. So I think it was really fun to do that and see that in total, rather than just one of us giving the whole talk. We've got everybody a little sense of their favorite piece or the piece that they know the most about.
Yeah, I thought it was a really great format. And I do suggest people go out and grab that video and watch it, because I think there's a lot of good information. I think it's easy to sit through and listen to. Even the financial piece, I think, is at a high enough level that it's not really into the weeds. And so I think you get a lot of background, which then you could springboard into giving us a call if you have questions about any of it, from the student center to the teacher to the financial piece. It gives you enough background to give us a call and ask questions if you have.
Right. I think that's a good point, and that'll really be a theme for us today. And one of the takeaways that we want you to understand today is exactly what you said. Reach out to us, call us, ask us questions, send us an email, come to open office hours. We really want to be able to answer your questions and provide the information that you need. When I think about trying to recap that state of the schools, and again, now the quality profile report that's coming out tomorrow. What is a quality profile? Just to give you a quick snapshot, a quality profile is a report that is done not only by New Albany, but approximately 65 districts all across the state of Ohio, who want to provide additional and more expansive reporting to their district beyond just test scores and the state report card information. It covers all of the areas of the school programming. It covers operations, it covers staff, it covers finance, which the state report card doesn't do at the same depth. And what we want to provide to you through that is a chance to see what is the high quality education experience that students receive here, and how are we doing that in a fiscally responsible way. So some of the highlights, I think, when we've talked about Monday night, that you can jump in. When you think about achievement, one of the things right away that you should know and that we should talk about is that we are seeing improvement in student achievement. We still have areas where we need to grow and improve, and we know those and we study those thoroughly. We are seeing strong levels of improvement in value added or growth for students. That arguably is the most important measure, because if students are growing, then they're going to achieve. So how does every student grow? How do we know where they are academically, and how do we grow them regardless of where they start the school year? That's critical. And we're also seeing improvement in college ready. Our ACT composite score went up last year. Our percentage of students reaching the ACT college ready benchmark went up last year. Our participation rate in advanced placement courses went up again last year. And all of these things are part of what we believe you expect from a high quality school district that is preparing kids for the future. And then in addition to that, you have all the arts awards and the athletic awards that our students are winning, really showing that well-rounded experience that they're having. So let's talk about finance, the finance piece of that. a little bit. I do want to keep talking about our academic results and our performance overall, but I think the challenge that we're faced with as a community, and we've said in other different periodicals or things that we've written in the letter that I wrote in the paper a couple months ago, I think now, the focus on the fact that even though we are a community that is divided over finance, I do not believe that we are divided over the need to provide a high quality education for our students. So we want to keep talking about finance from the lens of how do we focus on what we need to do for students so that we can do that in a fiscally responsible way. So let's do a little recap of some of the financial facts that would be helpful for people to know and understand. And then we're going to jump right into your questions. So actually, as I'm looking at the questions that are coming in, I want to just reiterate, it seems that many of you are just joining, maybe missed my message at the very beginning of our broadcast, where I gave an update about the safety message that we sent this morning. I want to stress again that all students are safe. A threatening social media message that was posted has been dealt with. That is all taken care of. The student is known. The different investigation procedures are in place, and everyone is safe. And we gratefully thank all of the students and parents who immediately reported this to the Safe School Hotline. It came in and was addressed with partnership with our police department within a very short amount of time, thanks to the very speedy response of people who saw the post. So thank you. Everyone is safe today. We are talking about recapping the State of the Schools address, which is online for you to watch in video. We're also talking about the fact that we have a quality profile report that's coming out to really give even more information, and that'll be sent to you directly via email blast, and will be on our website starting tomorrow morning. So we were just recapping academic results, student results overall, really encouraging everyone to watch the videos, to hear directly from our students and our staff the great messages. And so we were going to revisit just some of the financial facts and highlights, the things that people probably need most to know.
Sure.
So what's one?
Well, I think what I would do is just go back to when we filed our forecast in May, we looked at, we didn't have every piece of information that we have now. We didn't know state funding. We didn't know some of the real estate income that we were going to receive until late in June. In fact, some of it not until into July even. So those things have now been incorporated into the forecast. They do help us on the revenue side of it. But then the other things that have happened as well is that we had implemented the reduction plan. So reduced about $8 million out of our budget from the last year and the current year. We also didn't finish negotiating with our teaching staff until June. And our OPSE union as well. We did a great job working collaboratively with them, and they made many concessions, which also further helped the district's finances over the next 5 years to the tune of about $7.2 million. So a lot of changes in the forecast, especially as it relates to expenditures. Some revenue help, as I said, but most of it was really expenditure reduction. So at this point, provided everything stays the same and we don't have a lot of funding issues, we are positive ending cash balance in the 5th year of the 5-year forecast. So have really done a lot to reduce our expenditures, not only in the current year, but then as it flows through the forecast moving forward. So really financially at this point, looking really pretty healthy for where we are and where we've been.
Right, so I think that's an important recap. The $8 million in cuts are all of the reductions that we know if you're a parent and you're watching, that you and your children are experiencing through increased class size, reduced services, and eliminated programs, and expanded fees and costs to families. That layoff of over 100 staff resulted in a significant change in expenditures in that $8 million reduction. And then on top of that, the great work in partnership with our associations to change the structure of salary and benefits for the next 2 years is having a big impact on that as well. And many questions that we have about that is, again, how do we keep that high quality educational program? How do we realize that with more constrained resources? And we're continually working on that. I think that the conversation will continue to be that we will keep containing costs. We have been. I think one of the things we talked about in the state of the schools that's important for people to know is that that's not new for us.
Right.
Since we began this work in 2011, when I joined the team, we reduced and contained costs by about $12 million over that last 5-year period from 11 to 15, and now going forward we are doing that again. So our teachers and our associations have twice in 5 years made major concessions. So we have continually worked together to contain costs and understand that we need to do that. I think part of what, I don't know if you can talk a little bit about this, part of what is difficult for people is feeling like, well, isn't revenue growing though? So isn't that just taking care of it? Or are you, your revenue must be growing because the community's growing, and so if you're spending more than that, you must be overspending. I mean, how do we help people understand that?
Sure. So existing levies don't grow with inflation, and I think that's the biggest misconception that I run into when I'm talking to people. So once a levy is passed, the district doesn't receive more money because the value of your property increases. We do see additional income from new construction, so the different commercial or some of the residential that's coming in. We do see growth there. We have seen some growth at the state level. That's not been the historical process that we've had, but we have seen some growth. So we're only seeing, because of new construction and some state help, about 1.5% growth in our revenue. Because House Bill 920 says you're not allowed to get more money due to inflation. You can't receive more than what you received the day you passed the levy, except for those other, the new construction piece. So if your revenue is relatively flat, but your expenditures are going to grow with inflation, utility increases, salary benefit changes, enrollment. Yeah. So if you have those things, you're not likely to stay within the little growth that you do see in the revenue piece. Your expenditures aren't going to match that. So until the district begins to reduce enrollment, I believe 2023 is the year we're supposed to be pretty much set. We are updating our enrollment projection. But until you see some, reduction in the growth, and you're always going to have inflation and salary and benefit costs, you're never going to be able to live within those means without additional reductions.
So I was thinking about, we got pretty granular into healthcare and class size and House Bill 920 and a lot of things. Maybe it might be helpful, when I look at an organization, whether it's to join as a nonprofit board member, as an investor or something, you kind of want to know its history, and are you transparent? And one thing I think I appreciate about this organization, we only increased transparency over the last few years. You've been awarded several times for your work on the CAFR, which is the Comprehensive Audited Financial Report, which is a book like this thick that tells all the stuff that the districts do, all the spending. And I know you're branching out, and you're one of the first to do the open checkbook, which will be an online place where people can just poke in and their own checkbook, see where they're spending money. It's like Quicken for public institutions. So, I appreciate that when an organization has transparency, then you can study it and you can see how it's been. And we have multiple years of clean audits, all this stuff's reported well. And so from that, then you can say what's happening within the organization. And you mentioned 1.5% growth of our revenue. And over the last 3 years, that we've reported and been audited, I think it totals about 4.6%. And our expenses are about 4.4% or somewhere in there. So they're tracking that. So then you get to, now what does that organization need to go forward? And what is it forecasting? What is it planning to do? And how is it choosing to spend its resources? And in a business or something, a lot of times you have revenue that grows as your business grows and it comes along. We have new students and we don't get this extra revenue. And it's really kind of frustrating from not being in schools to understand that. But once you do, you have to monitor that, and then when you plan forward, it's what does your community want? Because your resource, your revenue is coming from your community. So what are their expectations for their kids and what they want to deliver in terms of their education? And so that's where you work to try and develop a plan, and we did the strategic planning process to really understand what is it that our community wants. And that's where, we only get new revenue if we vote for it. We do get some increase. We're 85% locally funded. That's very different than many districts. It's not completely unique, but our state funding is very low. So, again, we start to get a little more granular at the school function. But at the end of the day, when I looked and studied all this, we're transparent, we're audited, we know where we're spending our money, and it's how are we choosing to spend it, where we get it from. Well, we get it locally. And so that's where we need to focus on locally. And that's nice because you can make a choice locally about what do you want for your kids and how do you want to fund it. We've reached this turning point where, we are very highly property taxed. You're both residents as I am, so you know that. Yep. But that's a choice we made. I think we said in the State of the Schools thing, there's been 7 different times over the last 20 years or so. The community's voted to increase its property tax to support its schools, to facilitate the enrollment. And so now we're at this place where we chose not to. And so we made the adjustments. And I think it's an interesting time now to go forward, and how will we continue to do it? What is the responsibility of the state to us? We may think it's more, but I don't know that they think we should deserve more. Right. What is the responsibility of the local residential owner? What is the responsibility of the commercial park? What is the responsibility of city, municipalities? And so that's what we're talking about when we go forward. So I went from maybe a high-level history to try and get to the forecast, and then you guys are very good about all the particular details about, if we want to do AP classes, what does that mean in terms of staffing and training, and if we want to do more funding, what is the right percentage in healthcare?
And the balance. And so if you're that community member, how do you know that we are striking a balance? And I know that this measure doesn't always resonate with people, but really the best benchmark that we have is cost per pupil, because it means what are other districts spending in order to provide education to students that we are required by law to provide, and or that we believe is a high quality educational program. And right now we're below the average in the county, and we're going to continue to see that drop with the cuts that we've made. And our teacher salary, which you'll see in the quality profile that comes out, is very consistent, actually lower than some that we compare ourselves to. And so we are working to continually find the most impactful way to stretch, to restructure, to deliver the programming that our community wants our students to have in the most cost-effective way possible. So I know we could talk about this for a really long time, but I want to make sure that we spend the bulk of the time on your questions today. Feel free to email your question in. If you please consider checking the box where your email address is attached, because if we can't get to your question today, we would like to personally respond and get an answer to you about your question. So I'm going to start with pay to participate. First question that's come in is, what do the pay to participate fees pay for? And you can chime in with me on this, but the pay to participate fees pay for coaches' salaries
and the payroll taxes that are associated.
Yes, so we do use gate receipts to help cover some of the cost of athletics.
Right. Gate receipts pretty much covers the officials that we have to hire, any gate help that we have to hire, and then of course the equipment.
Right.
That's what that offsets.
Right. So there is that other.
So there's that, and then the general fund, which is why we have a pay to participate fee now, is what pays the salaries for the coaches and their payroll.
Yeah. And as a follow up to that, one of the questions we've heard is, so are those coaches' salaries competitive? And so we do study that in the OCC as well. And again, our coaching salaries are very comparable. They're not the highest across the board. They're not the lowest. But that is the cost of providing those programs. And so hopefully that helps answer the question.
Well, I think what's important there is to determine that number was we took our costs and divided by number of athletes, and that's how it came. So it's to cover our costs. I mean, it wasn't just sort of an arbitrary, oh, this sounds good, or this is 3 times what somebody else is doing. And if other districts are lower, more than likely they are subsidizing that.
Right.
That's exactly right.
So that's good.
That's exactly right. You know, part of that with pay to participate, one of the questions actually that came in during the State of the Schools we didn't have a chance to answer that we can attach to this conversation is the board going to consider, as we look at very slow and incremental restoring and rebuilding of certain teaching positions to try to keep our programming moving? It certainly won't be a massive rebuilding, but we are looking to some rebuilding of teaching positions. Will the board be talking about pay to participate and lowering those fees now with the improvement in the forecast, or even looking at transportation? And so I think that that's a great opportunity for you to talk about that.
Yeah, so I think we have already, you know,
Right,
even
right.
and when at the reduction plan, it's like, is this the right thing to do? And is this the right amount? And I think in the end, we sort of ended on, we wanted to protect the classroom first. And so that's where other things had reductions and fees put in place before we got to classroom teachers. And eventually we had to get to that as well. So, you know, in some sense, part of our discussion would be we look to restore these in reverse order.
Mm-hmm.
We still had that, just Monday night, we had this discussion again
Right.
to revisit it. And, you know, we recognize its fee, it's high. We recognize the burden it places on families. You know, many of us on the board write those checks as well. So we completely understand that, but we also understand that's a cost. And we have, one of the board's job is to allocate resources. And I think collectively, we kind of understand that we want to allocate towards education first. That's not to discount the advantage that athletics or any extracurriculars offer in terms of education. But we really want to look at the academic, the classroom situation first, and then we'll consider the athletics. And it's been a pretty constant ongoing discussion about what is the right amount. Fortunately, we've had you know, several scholarship people have contributed to scholarships, so that's helped some where that's placed a burden. And I know there's been a lot of work done by booster groups to raise funds, and that's like a developing exercise for this district. So, you know, I think it'll be ongoing. I don't think it's dead. I think it's something to consider, but it is also part of our future discussion about what do we want to offer and what
does
we
our
do.
Community want to fund?
Exactly.
And as we keep coming back to that. Certainly.
Yeah, I mean, and so to help with that conversation as well, what we've calculated is that for every $100 that we reduce pay to participate, it's a cost of $100,000. So those are the kind of dollars that we're talking about when we're saying let's reduce the pay to participate. And then you look at what other programs, services, you know, gifted, et cetera, intervention with that $100,000 paid for. And so that's, I think, where the board, you know, is having those discussions and struggles, knowing that it's all important, but how do you prioritize?
Good, okay. Next question, is the school district working with the city on alternate funding methods or sources to fund our schools? We have the chance to participate in meetings with our city leaders, and they are very, very collaborative. And, you know, I think one of the things I've shared in other public forums is that coming from other districts, certainly my experience has been that the city doesn't always need to be as proactive and as school forward thinking as our city has been in the way that they have built the school income tax or the shared income tax around the abatements so that we are relatively made whole from commercial development and helping build that tax base for schools. Anything to add about those conversations? I know that the city is interested in talking with us about a couple different possibilities. How can economic development continue to help the school district, and how can we do that in creative ways? I know that they're looking at that.
Yeah, and I know board members had individual conversations with different council members to understand kind of how this works and what are potential possibilities and what's the right split or what's the right source, because there are two cities in our district, in the city of Columbus and the city of New Albany. We most readily identify with New Albany, I think, because our names are the same. But there's a history of that collaboration, and it also, we're in a place too where we sort of spoke about in the state of the schools how we've been this fast-growing entity that's becoming more stable and more mature. The growth is slowing. The build-out of residential is slowing. The commercial campus is still growing. It's not all within our district, but it is within the city. And so it's probably a good time to reevaluate what is that right balance of funding between residential and commercial, and you know, if residential is flat and it's a flat revenue source, and if you could do something that's based on economic development that has some growth to it and may help on that thing. So I think it's a time to evaluate and reconsider what is the right thing for the next 10 years. It might be different than what was the right thing for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And so
think
those
so.
are good discussions to have.
And we are having those discussions, and I think that the city is very open to that. Questions about small learning communities or the phrase SLC. And the question is, are SLCs here to stay? How are they different from the academy idea that was not implemented? How and when will they be evaluated? Are they working, and how do you know? Great questions. So the first thing to talk about with that is to go to our website and see that we have posted some additional information to help people understand the power of a small learning community and why we are using this approach. With any improvement, we are always going to study the impact of that improvement, and it will evolve over time. So the purpose of a small learning community, as you've heard us talking about many times, is that our elementary school and even our middle school, but our elementary school is 1,600 students. That makes it one of the largest elementary schools in the state and even in the country. And so we have seen over the years and heard from many parents concerns about the fact that students were going year to year without having anyone in their class, year after year, that they didn't know. We were seeing increases in mental health concerns, social emotional issues that are a focus for us, as you've heard us talk about mental health. We also are focused on academic growth, and academic growth being personalized to every student. And when a student has a need for access to the content that is either in a grade higher or lower than them, that's very difficult when you just warehouse students in hallways of each grade, which is what we had in the past. So what we're doing now with small learning communities, we are seeing early evidence that it is working on both the social emotional and the academic access goals that we have for this. We do also see some of the things that are concerns. We're going to continue to talk about as a leadership team and with our parents. Things about should students of the same family be on different SLCs? Is that something that we should evolve and change for the future? Should we think about different ways that these students have lunch or recess together? Because those are things that parents have raised. But certainly, again, from the goal of social emotional health for students and academic progress, we are seeing impact, and we are going to continue to study and evolve this idea both with our parents and our teachers. We've had some early conversations with our PTOs, and again, as I shared at the beginning of the broadcast, they are exceptional partners. We rely heavily on them for insight, and we'll be working with them closely to give us that ongoing feedback. With the ultimate goal, again, of making sure that every student is healthy, safe, welcomed, and successful. And that's really the goal with small learning communities. How are students assigned to SLCs or small learning communities? Small learning communities, again, operate much like the assignment to classrooms have operated in the past. Our first goal is to look at academic opportunity that matches student need. And where do students need to be to access that academic opportunity? That's one of the things that we know we'll need to continue to evolve and improve to make sure that students have access to academic opportunity on any small learning community. After looking at whatever learning profile information was submitted by parents early on, after looking at whatever special needs or student services a student may need, and helping to identify where those services are best provided, then assignment to classrooms is predominantly random and done based on just making sure that every classroom has a balance of student need and a balance of student demographics. So hopefully that helps answer that question. I know that that's something that Mrs. Denny and Mrs. Smith have both written information about that you can check out on the website.
So April, a question I get sometimes on that is that if my sixth grader is assigned to an SLC, are they evaluated every year to see if that's still the right place for them, or are they just like stuck and it's not revisited?
Right. No, I think that's a great question. Every year, every student would be assessed in terms of what's the right placement, and parent feedback is a critical part of that. Is this the right placement for your child? Is this working well? Again, and engaging the parents and the teachers. Teachers play a huge role in recommendations about what they think. will be helpful for students too, in making sure that child's in an environment where they can thrive. So absolutely, that will be a flexible process each year. What is the district doing to reduce class size? Funds should be shifted in order to hire more teachers and reduce class size. What are the current ratios? This is a great question in terms of the fact that, and I hope you'll both stop me if I get too technical, because there's a difference between a ratio and a class size, and we've had a lot of conversation about that. A ratio of teachers to students includes all teachers in the district who provide service to the general education population. So that includes art teachers, librarians, guidance counselors, nurses, it includes all of the staff that it takes for us to provide a high quality educational environment. And those ratios have increased. But the ratio is not the same as class size. So when you hear that the ratio is 21:1, you might think, well, 21 sounds like a good class size, right? But I think the person writing this question already is aware that we don't have class sizes of 21. And all class sizes have gone up as part of this reduction. We have worked diligently to balance class size while still trying to keep student opportunity for students with the existing and remaining staff after the reduction. What we have done to reduce class size, even as early as 3 weeks ago, we did add a part-time teacher for middle school science. Middle school science class sizes were some of the highest class sizes that we were seeing. And so we did already go ahead, and the board was supportive of taking that step to add some additional support. So we are watching that carefully. We are already planning for next year. And as I said, as we work to plan this next budget, we have proposed to the board for consideration that we believe we do need to include about 12 to 13 teaching positions, additional positions for next year to address class size and to address the enrollment growth that we are expecting. And that after eliminating 53 teachers, that is not a significant restoration, but it is very intentional and it's very focused on critical need. And so that's how we are working to address class size. Why did the district reduce librarians and library time? Why not reduce gym instead? This is a really interesting question. This is certainly something that I'm sure, given the perspective of this question, there are just as many members of the community and parents out there that would argue that physical education is as greatly needed as library time. And so this was a very difficult decision. For those who may be watching who aren't aware, we eliminated 4 librarian positions. So we have only 1 district librarian K-12, but we decided that we could at least give students access to the library with the use of library aides, which is a lower cost. So we are using library aides to give students access to the library. It does mean they don't have the library instruction from a librarian. And we do believe that students need that physical education component, predominantly at the younger ages, but really at every age for their wellness, for their activity level. And so that was a difficult decision to make. I thank you for the question. We do think that library services are an important part of the academic program, and we hope that over time we can start to restore that programming. I cannot share with you if someone's asked the name of the student who made the threat or what will happen to him. Will the name be released? Based on privacy, we do not release the names of students that are undergoing discipline. You can be assured that we take every action and that our discipline process is robust and serious. And we do hope that parents use this as an opportunity to talk to their students about social media posts. We will take your social media post very seriously, and the consequences will be severe. We expect that students understand that they follow the code of conduct, and any threat or any harassing statement is something that can be disciplined if brought to school. So we are, I'm getting this time, we're getting close to running out of time. So I want to take a few more questions. Let's take a couple more finance questions. Why is our state funding so low? How is that determined? Can it be changed?
Sure.
What can we do about that?
So
have we been doing about that a lot?
Yes,
We've been
yes.
trying to do a lot about that.
I'll try not to get into the weeds about school funding. There are a lot of details that go into projecting what your funding is. But basically, it's the number of students that you have times a certain dollar amount, $5,900. But then the state applies a wealth factor. And so districts like New Albany are considered very wealthy by the state. So first of all, you've got that factor.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you look at the current funding formula, you also then have a capped amount. So the district actually, if you look at our calculated funding, should receive around $10 million from the state. But because there's a cap on the amount that we can increase from last year to this year, we're only receiving about $3 million from the state. And we're capped this year on 7.5% increase, and next year 7.5% increase. So less than a $300,000 increase in state funding.
Mm-hmm.
So 7.5% might sound like, wow, that's pretty
I was
good,
just
but
gonna say, yeah.
it's of a low number. So
And again, that gets to be a dollar amount that's unaffiliated to the number of kids we have. So
Right.
even as we
Right.
grow, that is a flat
Right.
dollar amount.
right. So we're receiving about $600 per student from the state. And as you know, we've been working diligently with our local legislators and worked through the legislative process to try to get some language in this budget bill for a minimum funding amount,
Mm-hmm.
so that we receive at least the same amount as private schools.
Right.
And that made it all the way through that legislative
Yeah.
process, and then was one of the line item vetoes. That
We
the
were
governor-
very excited that,
Yeah.
that it made it through the House, made it through the Senate, made it through the conference committee, only to be line item vetoed by the governor.
And
So
again,
we-
that wouldn't have given us the entire $10 million that
That's
is our
right.
calculated funding. It would have
Right.
been about $1.5 million.
Mhm.
Obviously, $1.5 million would go a long way towards helping us, but it still doesn't get us to what our funding is actually calculated to be.
Right, right. So that's a long conversation to
Yes.
say, basic state aid is about 6,000, we get about 600.
Right. And we're
And-
considered a very high wealth district by the state.
We're going to continue to fight the fight on private school minimum. We believe that, and we do know that we have members of the House and Senate that are very supportive. So we're going to continue
Yes.
to champion that conversation and hope that we see movement
Yes.
in that area. So I think we talked about, is the board going to restore busing? But and
Well-
that question might have come in after we talked about it. So do you
Yeah, I
wanna
think we
talk
probably
about
first
that again?
addressed pay to participate when we reduce that, and this often they both were cut around the same time. They both affect different groups of people. They both had very strong feelings about it, but they were both also outside the classroom. And so in terms of, this board's focus has been to protect the classroom and do the cuts that least affected that first. And then I think as we look to restoration, there's certainly lots of priorities ahead of transportation and athletics. Particularly, we have, I think it's like 35% of our students are identified and gifted in some way. And we've made some significant changes there in our gifted instruction. And we had this whole study that we did as part of our
Right.
strategic plan
That's right.
to understand how we can improve our gifted instruction and benefit those kids. And, we really had to pull off of that. So I think I know it causes great deal of inconvenience for a lot of people, but we're also we're more familiar with what surrounding districts are. And in some ways it's been helpful to see kids ride their bikes and do that kind of thing too. But in terms of priorities, in terms of sequencing, again, I think our focus is more classroom oriented than those other services.
So I think back to wrap up, it is a good opportunity to wrap up on the topic of gifted, because there was one last question about gifted that we ran out of time to answer. But we are looking at gifted, and we're very concerned about the cuts that were made to the gifted services. We cut half of our gifted teaching staff. We cut 100% of our gifted administrative support. We know that with 30 to 35 5% of our students being gifted, we have to address the needs of those students. And so we are looking to that being one of our very first areas where we need to rebuild and we need to stretch. And that actually was one of the areas that we did add a half-time teacher this September with the board's authorization to move forward with some additional staffing to try to create some more relief in that area that was cut very deeply. So thank you for joining me today. I'm sorry that we are already out of time. Again, I want to remind you and urge you, we need you to be engaged and involved. These are your schools. These are your children. When these 5,000 children walk onto campus every single day, we are fully committed to helping them have the absolute finest educational experience possible, and to do it with the most serious financial constraint and responsibility. And we'll continue to do that every day. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call or email myself, Ms. Jenkins, Mr. Ryan, or any of the board members. There's a place on our website at the bottom of the first page that says request more information, where you can click and it will send an email directly to a central location that will get to us, or you can email us directly. So come to an open office hours. Please call or email us. We hope to hear from you. We thank you for your support of our schools and for all that you do for our kids every day. Have a great day.